Today's music by the Barquette Brothers, and they get an encore.
Even though it's gone, Pete wants to do this.
I forgot a couple weeks ago to do this.
It's a sing-along.
This is called Longest Night, the Solstice song.
I think we did it.
By
did it
Jason
last year.
Webley. Yeah, we did this.
Take it.
Longest night, shortest night. Let's all do a pagan rite. Tree in the living room, I don't know why. 2 more weeks till the 4th of July. The apparent position of the sun is at its northernmost extreme, or at its southernmost extreme. Everybody! Longest night.
Shortest night.
Shortest night.
Let's all do a pagan rite.
Let's all do a pagan rite.
Tree in the living room.
Tree in the living room. I don't know why.
2 more weeks till the 4th.
2 more weeks to the 4th of July.
The apparent position of the sun is
at its northernmost extreme.
Or at its southernmost.
Or at its southernmost extreme.
It is no secret that Albert Lee is running for the U.S. Congress from our Oregon district, OR3. It is also true that our 501c3 status as a nonprofit prohibits us from advocating for a particular candidate or inviting campaign speeches. What we can do, however, is listen to ideas from all sides, and in light of that, we have invited Mr. Lee to share his vision for Oregon. We have also invited his opponent, who has accepted, but we have not yet found a mutually convenient date. Now about Mr. Lee. Born in South Korea to an African-American soldier father and a Korean mother, Albert grew up near St. Louis, where the legacy of segregation had had, to say the least, an adverse effect on the quality of public education. His mother worked 2 jobs to put him and his sister through parochial schools. While he was still a teenager, however, domestic violence left him, his mother, and his sister without a home and living in shelters. The family received help that allowed them to start over, help for which he remains grateful and which provided the stability for him and his sister to graduate from high school. That experience, among several others, inspired him to work toward creating opportunity for others. Becoming the first in his family to graduate from college, Albert then served in the Army, where he was selected for the 3rd U.S. Infantry, also known as the Old Guard or escort to the President. He has since worked in international trade and business before moving on to law school. His current role is as an academic dean at Portland Community College. He is an open atheist, a member of the Democratic Party of Oregon and the Portland chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, a volunteer on several government advisory committees and boards, and a variety of non-governmental community organizations. Would you please give a warm welcome to fellow freethinker Albert Lee?
So Joyce basically stole a good portion of my speech, but I'm going to still do it anyways. And like she said, I understand and completely understand that this is a 501c3. I am a political candidate, but what I'm providing you is information, first of all, about myself. Secondly, about some very important issues that we're facing, and providing you information about the things that you can do and an opportunity to have choice. So again, my name is Albert Lee, and I'm running to represent the people of the 3rd District of Oregon to the United States Congress. I'm running because I believe that democracy requires choice, something we haven't had in this district in over a generation. I'm running because we face a series of crises here in this district, across the country, and around the world that require bold action now, and not just inspirational and aspirational words. I'm running because I believe in the basic tenets of the Democratic Party when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's time that we uplift some new voices from some other backgrounds, from some other lived experiences to represent us in the most diverse district of this state. And yes, I'm running because I think it's time that we end this oligarchy, this plutocracy of elite, career, multimillionaire politicians ruling over us and replacing them with citizen representatives who know the struggle, who won't take corporate contributions, and who will truly represent and fight for the people. Now, like I said, Joyce kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the same information, but with a little bit more detail. So I am a sixth-generation American and an immigrant at the same time. I was born in South Korea, where my African-American Army dad met my Korean mom during the Vietnam War. Now, growing up in the 1970s and 80s in the States, I really didn't fit those neat little boxes. My sister and I, we weren't black enough. We weren't Asian enough. Folks couldn't figure us out, and that made them uncomfortable. And as a kid, I felt that. I hated being different. All I wanted to do was fit in. But as I grew up, I grew to embrace all of those things that made me different, unique, me. And I came to realize that actually none of us fit those neat little boxes. And those boxes divide us, and they hide us from the fact that deep down we're all truly the same on the inside. We all have the same hopes, the same fears, the same dreams. Who doesn't want to live free? Who doesn't want to be secure? Who doesn't want to thrive? Who doesn't want to be loved? Well, I believe that we all can in our America. I grew up in North County, St. Louis, working class St. Louis, right next door to Ferguson. My dad was deployed for most of my childhood, and my mom worked as a cook at a nursing home in the daytime and at a fast food joint at night, and she did so in order to put my sister and me through Catholic school. I know I'm here with a bunch of humanists and secular. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the reason was because our public school system was truly separate and unequal. Now, her dedication to our education was the key to our success. Her discipline, drive, and determination, well, that became mine. Meanwhile, the military had made my dad a virtual stranger to us. Growing up, I really didn't know him, and I certainly didn't know the impacts that his childhood of immense poverty, structural, systemic, institutional, individual racism would have on him. But by my sophomore year of high school, he returned home to us. And with him, he brought his demons. The verbal and physical abuse would eventually lead to our flight. Back then, there was no Violence Against Women Act, and apparently there isn't one now. Back then, your wife was essentially your property. Your kids, pretty much the same. There wasn't any protection. And so at the age of 16, I drove my sister, my mom, and myself east to an unknown destination, to an uncertain safety. We ended up just outside of Pittsburgh in a battered women's shelter. But like many victims of domestic violence, we soon returned home, only to have to leave again. This time we headed west to Kansas City. There we found shelter, and then another shelter, and then a kind family took us in, the Panabiancos, white bread and Italian. They helped my mom and me find jobs. They helped get my sister and me back into Catholic school. They helped us to secure our own 2-bedroom basement apartment. Now entering my senior year of high school, my 5th high school in 3 different states, you know, I looked at my future, and all I could really see were afternoon shifts at the grocery store, graveyard shifts at the gas station. College, that was a long forgotten dream. But it was at this point that my mom's best friend from St. Louis, well, she stepped up and she gave me her savings, $10,000. And she said, by God, you will go to school for at least 1 year. And it is because of Miss Mary that I became the first in my family to graduate college. Now, after college, I joined the military. Part of the reason was because I had a lot of school debt. After the military, I worked in international trade before moving here to Portland, Oregon, and working down in Salem. And, you know, it was about 10 years after my undergrad degree, that I took my next academic challenge, and that was law school. I got to tell you, law school, that was completely foreign to me and my family. None of us knew anything about that. And I will be honest that it was a struggle for me. But I made it through. And I eventually secured a decent job with a legal research company. And then I met my future wife, Hannah. And while this was before the Affordable Care Act, and our pregnancy would require a job change because, well, pregnancy was a pre-existing condition. So I had to quit a job that I loved, a job that paid decent, and find another one that would provide us the health care that we needed. Now, after our daughter was born, we returned here to Oregon to raise her and to start a business. I would eventually move on to become one of the deans at Portland Community College. Now, I'm standing here before you today because I, along with many other people in my life, took the bold action required during times of crisis. Were it not for my mom, my sister, Miss Mary, the Ponabiancos, and countless other folks, I wouldn't be here today. Fact is, I got a lot of help from a lot of people, and it changed the course of my life. None of us can go it alone. We need each other, and we need bold action. Now, the 3rd District faces a series of crises that have been allowed to fester and grow for over a generation. We have a homelessness crisis that, when I first moved here in 2005, was a crisis then, and it is super critical now. And there has been an absolute lack of doing anything from local on up to the federal government. Nothing has been done. Nothing has been done to address this very humanitarian crisis. Now, coupled with this homelessness crisis, we have the lack of affordable housing and the lack of living wages. The combination of those two things places way too many of us in the struggling class. Now, it only takes one car accident, one medical bill, one eviction, one bout of domestic violence, and one can find themselves homeless really quickly. And once in that situation, it is really, really hard to get out of that without some help from somebody or some government. There are a lot of other crises that we have here in our district and across the country and around the world that I can talk about, but the number one thing that we have is our climate emergency. We've got less than 7 to 11 years to do something, anything, to reverse years of abuse of our planet. You know, we get this little blip on the news right now about a little fire that's going on in Australia. I mean, the entire continent is burning. 500 million animals have been killed. And we get 30 seconds of it on the news. You know, I don't know what it's going to take for us to wake up, to see that our house is on fire, to see that we need to do something now. Now, one of the big problems that I think that we have is that we don't really have true representation of the people. What I mean by that is that we really have an oligarchy ruling over us. You know, the other day I was at the Multnomah County Democrats meeting, had an opportunity to speak before the group, of which I am a member. And, you know, I asked the Democrats, are we the party of the people? Or are we the party of the 1%? And in unison, I heard, we're the party of the people, right? But I got to question that, because we have 7 federal delegates, 2 senators, 5 representatives for this state. 100% of them are multimillionaires. 100% of them are over the age of 62, and I might not be talking to the right crowd about that. 100% of them are white. 100% of them are property owners, and 5 out of 6 are men. That simply isn't representative of our state or our country. Now, in addition to that, as far as not being representative of the state or the country, when you have a group of people that are all cut from the same cloth, that all come from the same background, you do not get the diversity of ideas, thoughts, opinions, lived experiences to get to workable solutions. This is why we have a climate emergency, because we've got corporations, you know, we've got petrochemical companies that pay off both sides of the aisle. You know, British Petroleum, Northwest Natural, all of those different groups. They're paying money to Republicans, they're paying money to Democrats, and quite frankly, we have one party that is saying that there is no climate emergency, or if it is, it's not man-made. And then we have another party that says, we need to protest this, but aren't really doing anything. What we're having effectively is lip service progressivism. What I mean by lip service progressivism is having a Black Lives Matter sign in your front door, or an In Our America sign in your front door, and thinking that's enough. Makes you feel good. Makes you feel good, but does it really do anything? So, I think it's time that we stop doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I think that it is time that we uplift some new voices from some other backgrounds, from some other lived experiences that are going to come and bring a challenge to represent the people as opposed to representing those at the very top. So I know that we've got a full hour here, but I hate preaching. You know? Oh, but I will preach on one more thing. And that's just to acknowledge that I'm your first atheist, open atheist that's running for Congress. And I think that one of the big travesties that we have with our federal government is this conflation of church and state. We have too much, and it's in particular, Christian-based church entering our government. And that needs to stop. But, you know, when I'm knocking on doors, when I'm talking to folks, when I'm talking to crowds, it's not about me talking, it's more about having a conversation. And so at this point, I would like to open it up to you all to discuss the issues that we have here in our district, the country, the world, or if you have any particular questions about me.
Hi, I have a question on your road to atheism. What started you on that road, and what made you really feel like that was your part of your being?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. And I got to tell you, so my background, my mom's side of the family, we have both Buddhist and Presbyterian. Her dad was actually a Presbyterian minister. And then on my father's side, it was basically Baptist. Black Baptist church. And I grew up in my great-grandfather's church, the one that he set up when he moved up from the South in the 1910s or 20s to St. Louis. It was Memorial Tabernacle Church. It was a Baptist church. And I had the fortune, I guess, of sitting in the front pew with him every Sunday in an unair-conditioned church in a polyester suit and spend the entire day in church with my great-grandpa. And I could definitely not nap off because that would be a strap for nodding off in church. But, you know, I grew up in that tradition. And then in about 4th grade, because I went to Catholic school, the Catholic school effectively, our nuns were great salespeople. You know, they were salesmen for Christ. And in 4th grade, Sister Marcella Polizzi, an Italian nun from the Sacred Heart of Jesus, she sat down next to me in recess. I'm messing up the story here. So I was comparing Catholicism from the Baptists. And I said, I was very rational in 4th grade. And I was like, you know, all-day church or 1 hour Mass? 1 hour Mass, I'll go with that. Now, during all-day church, the preacher was up front in that hot, unair-conditioned church talking about fire and brimstone and how everybody's damned to hell. And while he's preaching, he's got that glass pitcher of water that's sweating. And he would slowly pour the glass, and that was hell right there, watching him slowly drink that water while I'm sitting there stifling in a polyester suit. But he was like, "You're all damned to hell. Catholics, you go into a box, you tell the guy in the box your sins, you say 10 Hail Marys and 1 Our Father, and your slate is wiped clean. Eternal damnation, redemption." I'll go with redemption. So that's 2 checks for the Catholics and 0 for the Baptists. And then third, at recess, Sister Marcella Polizzi saw that I was sitting down, and she sat down next to me, and she looked and followed my gaze, and she says, "Oh, little Albert, you like Colleen Reisenbeckler?" And I said, "Yes, sister, I do." And then she leaned over to me, and she said, "You know, you got to be Catholic if you want to marry her." Yeah. So that was the conversion from Baptist to Catholic. And that was the funny part. The not so funny part was actually the struggles that we had with domestic violence. So when we were on our flight to driving down the road to Pennsylvania and staying in those various shelters, I was cursing God. I was like, I've lived a very good life. I've been abided by all the rules. I was a really straight kid. And this is what is happening to me and my family. Meanwhile, my sister grabbed onto her faith even more and grabbed onto it tighter and tighter. And while I disavowed it. And for me, and this is really personal, as we were going through this, and by the time I was a senior in high school, my sister had gotten so fervently religious that we had to institutionalize her. She was speaking to Jesus, she was talking, proselytizing the folks, and it was just not healthy for her. You know, she's recovered. I think she's a Unitarian Universalist or something now, so that's sort of like humanist light, right? But for me, I mean, it was just taking a look at different things. I've always questioned things like, they tell you to read the Bible. They don't really mean that, because if you do, you see all the contradictions, starting with Genesis, with the 2 creation stories that completely conflict with one another. And when I asked those questions in Bible study, when I asked those questions of the nuns in Catholic school, they kind of glossed over that stuff, right? And when you're a kid, you don't have the courage to really stand up. But as I got that courage when I started to curse God and say, I've done all the right things and still wrong things happen to me. And then, it was a matter of just stepping out there and saying, I question this. And then taking another step and saying, you know what, I don't believe this. And I got to tell you, there is one thing that I do miss from church, and that is the community, is being able to see a regular group of people on a regular basis. And, well, that's what you have here, right? you've taken that one portion of church, the community portion, and you make that a regular thing. But aside from that, all of the other things help to provide a lot of the destruction that we have around the world. I mean, you look at the Hindu nationalists in India, you look at the right-wing Christian, ethno-Christians here, you look at the state of Israel, I mean, all over the place. And for what? So, yeah.
I just wanted to know what your any proposals that you have on homelessness.
Yes, thank you. So here's a really simple one. How do you fix homelessness? House people. There is a program and a process that has worked in Scandinavia, has worked in Salt Lake City, has worked in New Orleans, and it's called Housing First. For instance, in Salt Lake City, it costs them essentially about $18,000 a year to house an individual, and it costs about $80,000 a year to incarcerate someone. So if you want to use a dollars and cents argument, it's cheaper to house people than to throw them in jail or throw them into mental institutions or whatever. Housing First projects kind of follow the method that one couple did for us when we were homeless. Bring us in, provide us the stability of a house so that we can get our affairs in order and move on from there. You know, if you don't have a stable place to live and shower, how are you going to hold a job? How are you going to take care of all the other issues you have? You have to have that foundational need met before you can move on to anything else. So I'm a strong proponent of Housing First projects. Now, in conjunction with Housing First, we need a single-payer Medicare for all system that includes mental health, that includes drug addiction. Now, I know that a lot of people have this idea that, oh, the homeless, they're lazy, or they're mentally ill, or they're drug addicted, but that's not the situation that most people find themselves in when they first get to be homeless. When you're in that environment, when you're in that situation of being homeless, that is when mental health issues arise because of the plight that you're in. That is when you start depending on drugs and alcohol because of the situation that you're in. It's not the other way around. And so by providing a Housing First project, and also in conjunction with that having a universal single-payer Medicare for all system that actually includes things that, you know, our for-profit medical system doesn't consider healthcare. Dental is healthcare. Mental health is healthcare. You know, eyes, your vision is part of healthcare. And drug addiction is definitely a part of healthcare. So if you have those two things, that's a good starting point. Now, in addition to that, we've got to address some other things. We've got to address the lack of living wages. Now, our minimum wage has remained flat and actually has retracted over the last 40 years. And I like to point this one out. My very first job, W-2 job, because I had jobs before that, you know, cutting grass and whatnot, was for a fast food company in St. Louis, Church's Fried Chicken. And I worked, the minimum wage in Missouri at that time in 1990 was $3.80 an hour. I think I got paid $3.12, which was a student rate, but $3.80 was the minimum wage. Now, if you put $3.80 into a real money calculator, the relative output for that $3.80 today is $13.10. Now, the minimum wage in Portland is $12.25. The minimum wage nationwide is $7.25. So 30 years ago, I made more money than somebody that's living on minimum wage is making today. Now, while the minimum wage has remained flat, suppressed, retracted, reduced, the cost of housing has gone up, the cost of food has gone up, the cost of everything, the cost of being has gone up. So you want to solve homelessness? Solve the minimum wage. Make that a living wage.
What has to happen, and what would you specifically do to address climate change?
Yes. Okay, big question, right? Huge question. We've had 150 years of industrial revolution across the world. We have not addressed all of the pollutants that we have in the world. We have an economic system that's based on a fossil fuel economy. We need to end the use of fossil fuels now. Not in 10 years, not in 20 years. We need to end fossil fuel dependency now. Now, why don't we do that? You know, back in the early 1900s, you know, the first automobiles weren't gas powered. They were electric. Okay? The reason why we had, in the late 90s or early 90s, we had a return to electric cars, but then that was quashed. You know, who killed the electric car? I think there was a documentary about that at some point. And now we're seeing a third resurgence on electric vehicles. But even this now is kind of being tampered or tamped down because there are forces, there are people that make a lot of money on the fossil fuel industry. They pay our politicians to look the other way. You know, we kowtow to dictatorships in Saudi Arabia and other places around the world for oil. We need to do everything we can to stop the use of fossil fuels. We need to convert our military-industrial complex into a green industrial complex because, quite frankly, we have a ton of people, a ton of expertise in a wide range of technologies, but we're focusing on building weapons of mass destruction instead of trying to figure out ways to cure our energy needs and to review and fix our infrastructure. We need to do that. And you know, I know that there have been so many people that have talked about this in the past, about having that moonshot, that focus. You know, World War II, there was a focus. You know, we stopped making cars in World War II, right? GM and Ford and Dodge, they started making tanks because that was what was needed at that time. The moonshot, you know, 10 years, 1959 and 1969, we went from not having one rocket that went into outer space to having men land on the moon. That takes a concerted focus effort by the entire society. And we are at a point right now where we face an existential crisis. We have a freaking continent that is on fire. And this is the third warning, because we had the fires in California and Oregon 2-3 years ago. I had to put a face mask on my daughter, followed by the fires in Brazil that took out a good portion of that. And they had the whole world wanting to send money down to Jair Bolsonaro to fix that. And now we have an entire continent that's on fire, and it's just not making much news while their prime minister was vacationing in Hawaii. We need to do everything we can to stop the use of fossil fuels. We need to convert our military-industrial complex into a green industrial complex. And then, most importantly, we need to seriously question our economic system. Because we have an economic system in capitalism that is built on overproduction, overconsumption, and built-in obsolescence. I mean, these things go out in 2 years now, when I'm sure you remember dishwashers and washing machines that would last 50 years. Yeah. So, but the reason why is because somebody makes money every time these things are turned, you know? We keep digging rare earths out of the ground. We keep doing these things so that somebody can make a buck instead of looking at our collective future.
Well, this is sort of a follow-on. Here I am.
Okay.
We created a Manhattan Project to create a horror because of what we thought was an existential threat. So what can possibly rally all of us around the idea of having a moonshot or a Manhattan Project for saving ourselves from our climate?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about Manhattan Project. We still are trying to figure out how to clean up the Hanford nuclear site, right?
Well, yeah.
From 70 years ago.
I don't mean nuclear. Just
yeah.
idea.
But yeah, I hear you. And this is, you know, sometimes I feel like the crazy man yelling into the wind. And I feel like a lot of us feel that way, that there's nothing that can be done because nobody is really paying attention. Quite honestly, I think that we have a combination of different problems that are all culminating into one. We have completely destroyed civics as part of our education, where people don't even understand how their government works. We have an education system that has been destroyed. You know, we've got Betsy DeVos out there trying to take our education system and convert it so that they can privatize that. Somebody else wants to privatize the mail. Again, because somebody makes money off of that. Prisons, you got it. And as our community, as our citizenry continues to get dumber and dumber, it gets harder and harder to convince. But I don't know what it's going to take. Is it going to take having 2 continents on fire? Having 3? I don't know. But I'm standing up to be that crazy man out there yelling to say, we got to do something different because what we're doing right now just ain't working.
I just want to say, when you get into Congress, you won't be alone. Thank whatever we decide to thank these days. Thank voters, or thank us, or something. And just to go back a couple of subjects, Medicare for all, which I think would be wonderful, but something that we can actually get. What about the public option? Would you support that?
No, I wouldn't support a public option, and here's why. Public option, what a public option would effectively do is it would send all of your sickest, poorest people into one small corral. Your private insurance company will cherry pick all the healthiest people because that's how they make profit, is to not spend money, right? So you don't spend money if you have healthy people. What a public option does is it effectively corrals all of your sickest, poorest people, and eventually that will collapse because the way that insurance works is you spread the risk, right? You spread the risk across the entire universe of that group. So if everybody in that group is sick, it's eventually going to collapse on itself, and then what you will have is either one of 2 options happen. Either they get folded into the private health insurance companies again, and we have less coverage at higher costs, or we revert back to a system where some people just don't get insured. And I don't think that either one of those situations work. And when you talk about a public option, I know that there are some people that talk about it being the stepping stone to get to where we need to go. Number one, we don't have time. Number 2, it doesn't work that way because that's what the Affordable Care Act was. It was supposed to be a stepping stone to get us to that. And we had the Affordable Care Act the first year it came out. It was decent. And then our premiums went up 30% the next year. In addition, with the Affordable Care Act, basically what it effectively did was it made little territories for different health insurance companies, so that in the area that we live, we had 2 options. And they all colluded with each other on the prices and colluded on what the coverages were, so that the coverages were decent the first year, and they all seemed to cut the same things the next year, and they all seemed to raise the prices the same amount the next year. So I just don't believe in it. I don't believe that health insurance should be market driven. I don't think that people should be profiting on the sickness and the death of people. I think that health insurance, much like our education, is a socialist idea. Insurance is a socialist idea, and it should be that way. When you put in a profit scheme on top of that, then you disrupt what its intentions are.
Yeah, I have a question about your minimum wage thing. Seems like raising the minimum wage is just part of inflation. What we need to do, I think, is to have some kind of price control, so the wage, so that prices of goods don't keep going up. So that's my thought.
Okay, so when you look at any of the graphs from the stats from the Department of Labor, you can see that the minimum wages remain relatively flat. And the minimum wage is an anchor. It anchors all other wages, right? So that it holds middle income wages at a certain place, it holds higher income wages at a certain place. But while you look at that spread of 40 years, while the minimum wages remain flat, productivity has increased through the roof, okay? That difference is profit that has gone to the folks at the very top, which has caused this immense wealth gap, which is the reason why we have 3 people in this country owning more than the bottom half of Americans. Now, this is unsustainable. It's immoral, to have that immense amount of wealth held by a small cadre of folks. For what purpose? For no purpose other than to say, I have it and you don't. That is economic waste, to take that out of the economic system and to hoard it. They were talking about this the other day. The top 500 billionaires last year increased their wealth by 25%. And that 25% increase would solve our climate emergency. So it's not about price controls, I don't think. I think that it is about control. It is about controlling the population and the masses so that those at the very top can continue to hoard wealth, reap the benefits, and have the rest of us suffer. And the more that we move toward this system of a consolidation, the closer we get to a French Revolution. And I don't think anybody wants that. In fact, I think that there have been a couple of billionaires out there that have written articles that have said, hey, maybe we should take a look at this. Maybe we shouldn't have as much money as we have, because they're seeing the writing on the wall. We're looking at social and political instability. The wider the wealth gap becomes.
All right, so question for you. And let's say that you get elected this go around in this 2020 election, and rather than 7 uncorrupted people in the House, we have 10 or 20 who are in there not taking corporate PAC money, representing the people of their districts. Our largest fight is going to be less with the Republicans and more with the Democratic establishment. How do you propose to wrangle the other Democrats to get on board with the policy agenda that the people actually demand and require from this country?
Thanks, Joshua. Joshua works for our campaign. But he also gives me the toughest questions. So we have witnessed in this last cycle with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, who's in the news? Those 3. Why? Because they're being bold. They're taking the bold action required during times of crises. They are effectively shifting the discussion to where it needs to be. Those people that have been in 20, 30, 40 years, they're all sitting there fat, dumb, and happy. They are happy just being there. We need to stop that. We need citizen representatives that are going to be bold enough to stand up, to say enough is enough, to say that we're not going to listen to the talking points of either one of these parties. Now, I've got a picture up here somewhere that'll be floating around of some other candidates from Brand New Congress. So I'm one of the endorsed candidates for Brand New Congress. It was the organization that helped support Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez last cycle. There was a documentary called Knock Down the House that followed the 4 of them. That organization is all about focusing on bringing regular citizen representatives to Congress, because we've had enough of the elites. We've had enough of those at the very top ruling over us. We need folks that are going to be brave, that are going to fight for our rights, that are going to fight for the needs of regular everyday Americans, that are going to understand those things. It's kind of hard to talk about a minimum wage if you never worked at minimum wage. It's kind of hard to talk about health insurance if you never had to go without health insurance. It's kind of hard to be against war if you've never served in the military. So I think that that is one thing. But number 2, there's 30 of us in Brand New Congress. There's another 30 in the Justice Democrats. And there are about 150 other progressive candidates that are out there fighting the good fight, trying to change, trying to have us not do the same thing and expect a different result. Not all of us are going to get in. That's the fact of the matter. Incumbents get a 90% win rate. We know this. There are plenty of people that say, you must be crazy to do this. I must be crazy not to do this, because quite frankly, we're running out of time. I've got a 6-year-old daughter who needs a planet to live on, who needs a stable country and government to live in, who needs a life worth living. And I'm not going to sit idly by because somebody says it's not your time. Somebody says it's not your turn. You've got to take your turn. And once we get another 10 of us in, that's a block. That's a voting block, okay? Right now, having 10, 4 is good, but having 10 in there, they will dictate and run the agenda of Congress, because neither side will be able to pass anything without those 10.
Yes, hi. So I've always heard a lot of stories about what's happening and what we can do on a surface level. And I think you've gone a little bit deeper, which is, I appreciate that. But where I think a lot of the problems rely in corporations, in church, in our government, is the lack of curiosity, lack of critical thinking, and herd mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to change, in my viewpoint, and all the studies that I currently still do, we've lost that. It's the herd mentality. It's the same thought process. So you talk about education, you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about diversity in these. So it's the lack of curiosity and the herd mentality. How are you going to deal with that? Because that's what's there.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you what, I deal with that every day. So I come from the perspective of being somebody that's always different wherever I am. No matter what situation I'm in, I'm the different person. When I was in college, I had access to all of the fraternities because one of the things that I did was I was able to draw empathy. I understood, because of my own plight, how to read and understand people from their perspective. And so I was able to get into almost all of the fraternities to, I wasn't a part of any fraternity. I was GDI, goddamn independent. But I was able to get access in there. But I'll bring it back forward a little bit more. My most recent position, and I am no longer a dean at Portland Community College. I just want to let everybody know that. I had to step down from that position in order to make this run. It was a state employed position. I went through legal, human resources. Effectively, it said you could either be the dean or you can make us run. So this run comes at significant sacrifice to me and my family. But being one of the deans at Portland Community College, I came into that position not having been a dean, not having been a faculty department chair, not having been an instructor. I was one of 3 finalists. The other 2 finalists were deans. They were faculty department chairs. They were former instructors. I beat them both out because they were looking for something different. They understood that they all had group mentality, the group think. They understood that they all had the same ideas. They were coming at and approaching things at in the same direction. And one of the things that I do on a regular basis is I ask a simple question. And that question is, why? That why question was what got me to becoming an atheist in the first place. Why? Why? So, for instance, when I was at Portland Community College, I noticed that we offered computer science at our 2 wealthier campuses on the west side of the river, at Rock Creek and at Sylvania, but we didn't offer it at Southeast or Cascade. I asked why. Well, the students aren't interested in it. No. Well, they don't have the aptitude. No. Well, there was all these different, and I couldn't get a satisfactory answer. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put computer science on those 2 campuses because it's an equity issue. This is one of the most lucrative degrees that somebody can get at community college, and we're effectively telling the poorer half of our community that they're not worthy of it. Your funeral. That was the answer, your funeral. I said, okay, I'll take that. I put it on the campuses through a lot of politics and negotiation, all the other stuff, backhand stuff that you have to do because there's a lot of politics when it comes to collegiate administration. And the first term we didn't have that high in the amount of enrollments. Second term we had them both full on both campuses. And effectively, we saved a lot of students a lot of time and money because there were a lot of students from the east side that were taking the shuttle to come over to the west side campuses to study computer science. That's an hour on the free shuttle or gas money or whatever. And effectively, we provided that equity. We provided that opportunity and access. Now, sure, we had a lower pass rate, a higher fail rate in those 2 areas, but it wasn't because the students weren't trying. It wasn't because the students didn't have the aptitude. It was the lack of opportunities they had in undergrad, or not the lack of opportunities they had in grade school and in high school. So what we need to do is we need to shore up and provide more supports for them there to ensure that they could get to understand and study those things. So strengthen their math and science classes. It's going to take them a little bit more time, but we're not going to deny them that access of opportunity because a bunch of other deans said that's just not the way to go. So I think that you need to have, like you said, that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, that critical thinking, and really be bold enough to stand up and say, you know what? Why continue to do the same thing if it ain't working? You know, let's try something else. And if that doesn't work, let's fail quickly and move on to the next thing, because that's what you do in business also. The businesses that succeed are the ones that fail and fail and fail quickly and recover and learn from their failures. The ones that don't are the ones that continue to do the same thing and don't know what's going on.
I wondered about the healthcare issue maybe from a different perspective. What about the thought of simply pushing to make it illegal to be in the healthcare business for profit? So all healthcare providing corporations would have to be not for profit, and then there would be a cap for cash on hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good version. There's a book out there by T.R. Reid called The Healing of America. And in that book, he discusses healthcare around the world. And the single-payer Medicare for all system isn't the only system that would work. This one that you just described is the Bismarck model. It's the one that's being used in Germany, where effectively you've got about 300 or 400 different healthcare nonprofits that, like you said, cannot make a profit, that the government pretty much dictates what the cost will be for everything. And so people pick and choose which one they want to go to, but they're effectively all nonprofits. So yes, that is a model. I think the reason that we all focus on the single-payer Medicare for all system is because Bernie Sanders has been the proponent of that one. He was the one that took it in 2015 from being ridiculous to being something that's possible, to the point where we have half our presidential candidates talking about a single-payer Medicare for all system. There are 4 or 5 different models that will work. Your Bismarck model would work. The National Health Plan in the UK would work. The Canada model would work. But you know, for a lot of us, we have focused on the single-payer Medicare for all system. Number one, because I think a lot of people understand that system better. And instead of having, because that system right there also still has a layer, so you're still losing something. If you eliminate that layer between the health provider and the payee, that's just a little bit more that's going to healthcare as opposed to an administrative cost. And yes, there is an administrative cost when it comes to the government running the system as well.
I noticed in your slide, and also you mentioned in your speech about TriMet, free TriMet, and then the importance of infrastructure and rebuilding our bridges and roads. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. I was a member of TriMet's Transit Equity Advisory Committee. It was one of the various civic engagements that I've done when I was a dean. That was 50 hours a week as a dean and another 20 hours a week doing volunteer work on homelessness. TriMet was one. And one of the things that I asked TriMet on a regular basis was, what portion of our revenue, because we had a lot of issues at the TriMet Equity Advisory Committee about people getting beat up and fined and harassed by the fare enforcement people. So the question that I always came up with was, how much of our revenue is generated from fares? Anyone want to venture to guess? Lower. 17%. 17% are generated by fares. Now, that's not where you stop. Going back to your critical thinking point, what percentage is used on fare enforcement? 6%. How much is used for administration costs for the ticketing, the kiosk, and everything else? You're down to the single digits of what that fare is generating for TriMet. So effectively, you can have a TriMet system that is free, and it won't hurt the system, period. It costs about $500 million a year right now to make the entire system, as it is to this point, free. That's the cost of the Rose Quarter expansion. Now, there are some positive externalities when you come to having a fairless system. You get less people in their single occupancy vehicles. You get them onto the buses. You get them onto the trains. You have less traffic. You have lower issues with air quality. You have less money out of people's pockets, which they can then put into other things. You'd have less wear and tear on the roads. Okay, so that's the TriMet portion. But then going on to the infrastructure portion, we spend $7 trillion, almost $7 trillion on war for the last 20 years. Nobody talks about that. We give a tax break to the top 1%. That's going to cost our children. Nobody talks about that. But when you talk about trying to build education, rebuild our education system, rebuild our roads and bridges, well, how are you going to pay for that? You talk about health insurance, how are you going to pay for that? Anytime you're talking about things that are going to be of service to the people, there's always this question about how we're going to pay for it. But whenever it's about those at the very top, and the tax breaks and the wars benefit those at the very top. The tax breaks obviously directly benefit those at the very top, but the wars benefit those at the very top too. How? Well, did you see those stocks just go up at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin after Trump does his craziness and his insane political assassination? People who have vested interest in these companies make money off of war. War makes money. It doesn't make peace. But going back to the infrastructure, I mean, think about it. If we had that $7 trillion and we used it to fix our bridges and our roads, how many people would have been employed? Okay? If we used that to rebuild our schools, how many people would have been employed? If we used that to take care of our education system, how many people would become more enlightened, would understand how our government works? They don't want us to understand how our government works. Okay? They don't want us to have our children understand how this works, because all we want are sheep that are going to go and work, go get your six-pack at the end of the day, and forget about it. We gotta fix this, because otherwise we'll continue down this path of destruction.
I have a different question. Our election process seems to be continuous and consumes a lot of time, resources, and of course, too much money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what can we do to make it more focused and much less expensive?
Publicly financed campaigns. We need publicly financed campaigns. Look, running for office is a luxury for the wealthy. For me, I don't take any corporate contributions. 100% of the contributions that we have are coming from people, regular, everyday people. We've gotten contributions from people from all 50 states and Democrats abroad. We don't accept corporate money because that's part of the problem, money in politics. Quite frankly, I think is the root of all of our problems has been the money in politics. Our opponent, 65% of his money comes from corporations, mainly from outside of the district. If we had publicly financed campaigns and we shortened the cycle to 12 weeks, you'll have more diversity of ideas, you'll have more diversity of candidates, because quite frankly, I'm taking a ludicrous risk in running, okay? And most people aren't as crazy as I am to do that, to risk your family's well-being to do this. And the fact of the matter is, if it's only a sport or a game, which it isn't, it shouldn't be a game, for the wealthy, we're never going to see the diversity of people, the diversity of thoughts, the diversity of ideas, and have a real opportunity to get people that are going to represent us. So, publicly financed campaigns.
Yeah, see, actually there were, your slides have answered the question that I have, and some of your comments have too, but I'll ask it anyway. Shortly before you announced your campaign, there was a vote in Congress in which only 17 people voted against it, and it was to make it a federal felony to criticize Israel. Would you have been one of those 17?
Yeah, no, I am a proponent of boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel. The state of Israel as it stands today is an apartheid state, okay? It has violated international laws time and time again. The United States, for some bizarre reasons, continues to stand by this country that is not democratic, that is violating human rights, and continues to harass and kill and maim Palestinian children, and effectively put Gazans and Palestinians into an open-air prison. So yeah, no, I would not be a part of the majority that wants to say that is a crime to besmirch Israel. And there is a difference between the state of Israel and the Israeli people and the Jewish people. I know that a lot of people are afraid to talk against the state of Israel because you'll be labeled an anti-Semite. I'm not afraid of that because I'm strictly talking about the state of Israel and the actions of that state.
Yeah, I have a question or comment on healthcare. We have a system set up in the United States where the U.S. government sets caps or takes bids on providing services, medications especially, through the Veterans Administration. And does it seem like such a crazy flight of fancy for a government healthcare system, and I think Medicare does the same thing, puts caps on some. Is it insane for a government to put caps on services or what you will pay for, or prescription drugs or something? You know, you can get the finest paying system in the world, but if your costs are allowed to grow exponentially, you know, your population's not benefiting.
Yeah.
So would you be open to some sort of controls on at least the cost? I mean, refining the healthcare system so it's more equal and effective, but also trying to reduce the cost that we're paying.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the VA, because the VA, number one, is one of 3 completely socialist health insurance that we have around the world. The VA, the Department of Defense, and Cuba. Okay? Those are completely socialist systems. And what I mean by a socialist system is it is a system where the government controls both the access to the care, the provider of the care, and pays for it all. So in the VA, Cuba, and the DOD, and we experienced that when I was a kid, when my dad was in the Army, you know, our doctors were Army doctors. They were paid for by the government. Our medicine and my cast, that was all paid for by the government. We never saw a bill. Now on the flip side, the government turned around and looked at the healthcare pharmaceutical companies and said, this is how much we're going to pay for this. Not a dime more. Okay? What's crazy is having to go to Canada and re-import medicine that was made here, because Canada, for some reason, said, this is how much we're going to pay for our medicine and not a dime more. And then we have to go to Canada and re-import that medicine? That's ludicrous. You know? Canada's got, what, 30 million people? We've got 330 million people. I think that the United States would have way more leverage, way more negotiation, way more buying power than Canada does, and should have lower prescription costs than Canada. But it isn't that way because of the money in politics. We have people on both sides of the aisle that take a lot of money from healthcare, health insurance, pharmaceutical. Even Earl does. You can ask him when he comes back around this way. And then ask them, do they really want to stand for having a universal healthcare system, one that controls the cost of pharmaceuticals, one that controls the cost of everything. The reason why we don't is because of the lobbies of the health insurance companies, the lobbies of the specialty doctors, the lobbies of the pharmaceutical, of the health insurance, pharmaceutical, and specialty doctors. But yeah, obviously we should be capping the cost. And for that matter, we should be capping the cost on the things that we spend money on in the military too, instead of having $330 million for a damn plane.
So, first off, I want to say that you are an incredibly well-educated man, and thank you for what you do and for your sacrifice, the sacrifices that you're making for the public, speaking people's truths and, you know, opening people's eyes. Having people in a room like this can be pretty awakening. You know, somebody had asked you something that got me thinking. She said something along the lines of, well, how do we hold these companies accountable, or what is it that we can do as a society to put more pressure for people in society and these businesses to do something? And I want to know how you feel about this, because personally I think that we need transitional business plans, boycotts. I think that we also need, like, you know, I have heard that there's some loopholes in the government where packaging, for example, businesses are, I don't know if this is true, maybe it's state by state, but I've heard that some businesses are not actually allowed to use hemp as packaging for legal reasons that are tied with like big pharma. So in my mind, you know, I think we really need to start boycotting, coming up with business transitional plans so that they have a business model, you know, something to look up to. And I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, I think this is my last question, right? Okay, really quickly, I am a democratic socialist, and what that means is I believe that we should marry economic democracy with political democracy. In other words, we should have workers be able to have a say in the decisions that companies make. If we had workers at the boardroom table at, say, McDonald's, we wouldn't have a CEO that makes as much as the average worker does in 1 hour as an average worker does in a whole year. You know, having more of a say, more of a voice for the people on the bottom, economic democracy would, I think, help to curtail and curb the excesses of our unfettered capitalist system. So I want to thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate spending some time with you, and I'm going to stick around. I guess you guys have coffee and donuts. There's something over there. I'm happy to speak with people individually. We have some information if you'd like about the campaign. You can also find more information at albertlee2020.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Like I said, we aren't taking any corporate contributions, so if it's something that you would like to support, you can do so online as well.
Thank you.